They should have said the poet. The poet. They should have said the poet. The poet.
Sending Poets.
This is Sending Poets, a podcast we named after the line in the movie Contact when Jodie Foster says they should have sent a poet after traveling through the wormhole. My name is John, with me is Bob and Tucker, and today we're going to talk about that very movie, Contact, as well as the book that inspired it and the general overall genius of Carl Sagan. Very excited about this. Bob, how's it going? Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm looking forward to the conversation. This is a obviously pivotal conversation we've been looking forward to having on this podcast. It's essentially what it's about.
Yeah. Tucker, good morning, brother from another mother. How are you doing?
Doing well. Excited to talk about one of my favorite people. I don't idolize many people, but Sagan is top of that list. So
Yeah, same. Yep. So I thought we'd just jump right in with like just general information about the book and the movie. So I thought this was interesting. In 1981, Simon & Schuster gave Carl Sagan a $2 million advance on the novel, which at the time was the largest ever made for a book that had not yet been written. Pretty neat. And then it was published in September '85, and the first printing was 265,000 copies. And in the first 2 years, it sold 1.7 million copies. So pretty good.
you know,
return on that
the
advance,
other
I think.
thing that I found interesting about the book and the movie is that him and his wife actually wrote the screenplay in like '79.
Yeah, it's
So
at the
they
end,
actually turned the movie into a book,
yep.
which is kind of opposite how that usually happens.
Right. Yeah, I did think that was super interesting as well. What I pulled out of the book, it says like in 80, 81, but I'm sure in 79. But yeah, that basically, yeah, they thought of this idea as a movie, which also is out of the sort of Carl Sagan wasn't a movie writer. In his wife Andrewian, they wrote nonfiction, and so I thought that was super interesting that they started this kind of movie idea, ended up turning into a book, and then of course became a movie.
But he was hosting, what was it, Cosmos or something
Cosmos.
like that? Yeah. So he was, in the biz, if you will.
That's true.
And, yeah. So it's an interesting take on it, though. I 100%, I like that stream of thought, meaning usually it's a novel that gets made into the movie. In this case, it was a screenplay made into a novel, made into a movie, which is, that's fascinating.
Totally. Also thought it was interesting. Fun fact here. Carl Sagan's physicist friend Kip Thorne gave Sagan ideas on the nature of wormholes when he was developing the outline of the novel. If you are a big Christopher Nolan fan, you might recognize the name Kip Thorne. He advised and consulted on the black hole and wormhole imagery in the movie Interstellar, which is also a fantastic movie. But anyway, and I think Kip Thorne's probably out there in the YouTubes. Pretty fascinating guy as well. So
Indeed.
And then the last thing I thought was interesting is the main character, Ellie Arroway, is based on a real life SETI researcher, SETI search for extraterrestrial intelligence, yeah. Named Jill Tarter. I didn't deep dive into her, but that sounds like something interesting someday to know. There's a real life person who kind of inspired this character. So And then for the movie, so the movie was released July 11th, 1997, and tragically, Carl Sagan had died by this time. He died in December of '96. It still just seems like such a tragic thing that he didn't get to see the final, product. I'm sure he was, involved in the production and stuff at some point, so I'm sure he had some idea about what things would look like. But what a tragedy that he didn't get to
And
see the
even
final
if
thing.
John, even if he did, he didn't enjoy it like he could have.
No,
Yeah.
no, he was pretty sick at the end.
Yeah.
And if you ever want a good cry at the end of Billions and Billions, which is a book that I think he wrote with his wife, but there's an afterwards by his wife in that book
Yeah.
talking about the end of his life that'll just tear you up.
Yeah. I'm not opposed to a good cry.
No,
maybe not.
gotta-
Maybe not during the show, but
No,
I just
not during the show.
But I
That'll be
feel
in the other episode.
yeah,
Yeah.
bonus episodes.
They should have sent a box of tissues.
Right. Excellent.
It kind of reminds me of Steve Jobs a little bit in that, it was just so untimely and, just one of those visionaries. Like my point is you kind of assume let's put it this way. You assume like Animal Farm, you assume Boxer is going to break down because he's the big, strong horse, It's the smart ones when they go early, it's like that hurts really bad because when Snowball runs off, it's like, oh shit, we just lost everything. He's the smart pig. Anyway, sorry about that.
Yeah, that's another one I should go back to sometime. I remember reading that in some grade in school, but I don't think I was in that mind space to really appreciate it like that I'm sure I would appreciate a lot more now,
Oh, definitely,
And
definitely.
Since we're doing Contact, when that movie came out, I know I saw it, but it didn't leave a lasting impression at the time. And I don't know, I would have been 16, 17.
Right.
My interests were elsewhere at that time. And, reading it as an adult and watching the movie, hugely impactful. Like,
Totally. Yeah, same.
Yeah, I think that's key is you can't account for all the context that's built up in your life, your intuition, all your experiences, etc., that really allow you to watch the same movie twice differently, right? Exactly.
Yep.
Like how many times do you watch The Matrix? All the rest,
Right.
All the great ones. You watch them over and over, and every time you kind of see something new or you've changed. And I love that. Me too, by the way. And I'd never read the book. So I'll say that was powerful just to have the source of the thing. Because I watched the movie when it came out, and I've watched it a couple times. It's always intrigued me. I love the movie, especially certain lines in the movie. Everybody's got key things. So the Sending Poets thing has always resonated with me extremely deeply.
Yeah.
But not having the book really opened my eyes. So I can't wait to continue down the path, John. I'll relinquish here, but yeah, the book was like profound. Let's put it there. It was profound.
Yeah. Great adjective for it.
Thank you.
So just a couple other things about the movie I thought was cool. Robert Zemeckis was the director, of course, Back to the Future and Forrest Gump fame. Alan Silvestri did the music. He also did the music in Forrest Gump. When I did get my wife to watch this with me this week, and that was one of her observations. She was like, especially the sort of more tender melodies. She said it really reminded her of Forrest Gump, so that was a fun kind of tie-in. And then the screenwriters were James V. Hart and Michael Goldenberg. Just fun fact about Michael Goldenberg: he's the only screenwriter besides Steve Kloves to do a Harry Potter movie. Steve Kloves did all the other ones besides Order of the Phoenix, I believe is the one that Michael Goldenberg did. So
oh wow.
Yeah. So but yeah, so let's dive into this. I thought what we would do is kind of just follow the storyline through the book and the movie, and just kind of talk about differences here and there. There's plenty. There's lots of similarities as well, but we'll just kind of flow along that way and just see where it takes us. And in general, I think we'll just kind of keep an eye on the time, hour and a half, try to keep it around there and see where we're at. I know we're both, we're all happy to do extra parts of this conversation.
I think it's presumed at this point. I think we're gonna go extra parts.
Yeah. She said just at the beginning, this is part one. So, but so I honestly, I don't remember the exact first scenes in the book, but the opening scene in the movie is one of the greatest opening scenes in any movie I've ever seen. It's so good because it's this, it's telling you kind of what's about to happen, what's going to happen, I guess, in a way, because it just, from a black screen, it just cuts to a shot of the Earth with radio signals, in the kind of 90s time frame. And I don't remember exact ones. I could have went and written out every piece of it, but there's, music. I think it was a Crash Test Dummy song, so that's 90s, right? But what's so great is it's zooming out from Earth, and the further it zooms out, the further back in time the audio gets. So then all of a sudden, yes, you hear a flock of seagulls, 80s music. You hear, these, speeches and stuff from JFK. It keeps going back sometime around like Jupiter or Mars, I think, is or in the asteroid belt. There's maybe the Winston Churchill. Is that who? The only thing we have to fear? No, Franklin Roosevelt. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That kind of pops in there. So it's the whole thing is that the further away from Earth, the further back in time it's going, which of course pays off, brilliantly in the way that the signal is explained later. So won't get too much into that right now, but just
hold on. That triggered one thing in my thoughts, which is in the book, but not the movie. I don't believe they profoundly bring up the physics of the signal stopping. Do you guys remember that? I just recall like how profound that was in the book, that they bring up. There's no way so I'm spoiling the end, obviously. Spoiler alert. When Ellie comes back and she's trying to justify, she went on a journey and it didn't just turn off. And in the book, they're like, this was all a hoax. The signal stopped. How could they know to stop the signal, right? Because it's traveling through space.
Yeah, they would have had to stop it 26
years ago.
Exactly. For the exact point they knew she would activate the machine,
there was no answer for that. I love that book, by the way. There was literally no answer for that question. It was such a fuck you, man. I can say it put such a fuck you on that, because everything else I love how he frames it, and I get, but that's literally the whole meaning of this entire work of art, in my opinion, is there's going to be this point where it's going to be a fuck you moment. What do you do with that? And I just love it. I just really love it. It's just so intriguing how this whole thing is set up.
I think it's almost, it's like his literary way of saying that there's still magic left to be discovered in physics. There's still things that are going to happen that we can't even fathom at this point.
Yeah, me too. Yeah. Nice. I appreciate the spoiler alert warning too, but and anybody listening to this, we are going to be spoiled. This is our love of it. So
like 35 years old, right?
Yeah. You've had your opportunity.
Right.
It's been out.
Oh man. So so then the movie kind of introduces the young Ellie with her dad, hugely important kind of relationship in really kind of both the book and the movie, but a couple lines that appear a couple times in the movie that are great, when the dad says small moves, because she's making adjustments on the ham radio trying to pick up signals from other places. It's a great scene where she's like asking, like, could we talk to people here, could we talk to people there in other places, and he's like, probably need a bigger satellite, blah blah blah. And of course the little like drop, she's like, can we talk to mom? Well, so in the movie, Ellie's mom dies in childbirth, hugely different from the book. In the book, Ellie's mom is alive basically till the end. I am jumping ahead a little bit here. Let me go back to a couple things the dad says. He talks about the great line about, if it is just us, the whole vastness of the universe seems like an awful waste of space. Brilliant kind of line that comes back later. I love it. And then in the actual scene that she makes contact, she draws, or she finds out she's talking to somebody in Pensacola, Florida. And so she draws a picture of the beach in Pensacola. And it was on this last viewing with my wife that I was like, that's the scene, yeah, where she meets the aliens, whatever.
Snap.
Yeah,
Snap. Oh.
Which I don't remember if it was, described that way in the book. It could have been, but it was, just really well.
I don't think so.
Well written.
So. Maybe I missed it in both. Then that's crazy. Yeah. I don't recall that reflection in the book, but I do know what you're talking about in the movie now. That you say it.
So I listened to the audiobook. I've only read about 70% on Kindle with notes. Just ran out of time. But one thing that I found interesting reading last night is they talked about there was this huge like organic thing they grew in this vat that they never really understood what it was for, but it was above and below the capsule. But it was, it was a grown organic thing, and they were almost worried that it was alive and it was going to reproduce. To me, thinking back, I think that organic thing is probably what somehow interacted with the people in the capsule that was able to pull those memories.
Wow.
That was able to somehow scan the people, pull her dad out of her mind, pull that beach scene out of her mind.
Yeah.
But it's never intentionally said.
Isn't there a moment when they get to the place in the book? I believe it's like a longer experience where the whole crew sleeps or whatever, and I think they go through their brain at that point, don't they? You know what I'm talking about? Is like some kind of a scanning process or something where they're all there and then they're all like separate out and they each have their own experience, right? This is one of the divergent points, is you have 5 crew members in the book versus Ellie, obviously, in the movie. And I think each one had their own unique, customized, like algorithmically experience, right? It was all a reflection of their own anticipations. And so that's why it strikes me so familiarly when John brings up the beach in the drawing, because that makes perfect sense. I always wonder where they got that beach from.
Yeah.
I was always like, why is this? Like, I get it. It was beautiful. Don't get me wrong. But like, why that? And it was always, I don't think they described it. I can't remember in the book if they described the beach or not. Maybe they did. I don't remember. Do you
I
guys
think there
remember?
was a beach. I think it's interesting because I think they all land on a beach and then they all go off in their own sort of directions because their loved ones. I can't remember if Ellie sees the loved ones approaching them, she just sees them go off and she stays on the beach. Yeah.
She just stays there the longest and they come to her. That's exactly
right.
And then she only has a little bit amount of time left, and all the rest. But I think to Tucker's point, there was some interesting engineering that they did in the book to try to make this thing a reality, sci-fi reality, right? To have some kind of an organic component. I think that was brilliant. I don't think I've seen that.
I forgot about that.
Too many other places in the science fiction canon where they incorporate an alien transmission, but it becomes almost biological. I think that is fascinating.
Now, my wife and I were talking about it after we watched the movie because, granted, in the movie they just send Ellie, whereas in the book they send 5. And from a screenplay standpoint, you really lost nothing by cutting those other 4 people out. It was probably easier to have a coherent story by just showing one person having that experience.
Takes the politics out of it. Yeah. There was a lot of politics in there. That was the second thing. So the 2 main themes that I thought Sagan just crushed. One of them was this magic thing that you talked about before, Tucker. And the second one was a way to unite a bunch of people who are divided by nothing but their own ignorance, essentially, right? This is a way to unify the planet, y'all. Sagan literally figured out, and he put it into a metaphor, so we'll accept it as a story. But the reality is, this is how you do it. you have an external threat or an external opportunity, something external that creates a unifying moment. And in the book, it was so beautiful, guys. It was so beautiful how he weaved the ridiculousness of arms against nations and nuclear, proliferation and all this ridiculous, crazy shit. And all you had to do was pull together and make this alien tech. And holy shit, look at the ride rod,
Right.
I thought it was genius. It was one of the most genius things.
Yeah.
So those two parallel tracks of Sagan's are as beautiful as the Mona Lisa. I mean, it literally is that much of a work of art.
Yeah, I agree.
No, I also want to bring up, since this podcast is called Sending Poets, in the movie, she says it while she's traveling through the wormhole. Now, I believe in the book, she doesn't. And I haven't gotten to that part reading through it, but I listened for it in the audiobook and never heard it. But she does actually say it when she's on the space station looking at Earth.
I've got the actual quote. You want me to read it?
Sure, please. I think it's important.
But I don't have what I realized as I was highlighting stuff. I wasn't making notes, and then I was like, I should have, because it's like I've got this. It's great functionality in the Kindle. You can highlight stuff and then have it send you a PDF or a CSV file of those highlights. It's great. But without the notes, it's like, I don't have the context. Now I have to go back and find it, which I didn't do with any of this. So I don't actually know who said this, or if it was just, maybe nobody said it. It's not in quotes, so I don't think anybody said it. Might have just been in the narration. Yeah.
I think it
but
is. But
it's they should be sending up young poets and composers, artists, filmmakers, and deeply religious people not wholly enthralled to the sectarian bureaucracies.
Yep.
This is
a great way to say
that. This is what they stripped out of the movie when they collapsed it to Ellie as the crew members.
Yeah.
They took all this context, which was so powerful, honestly, as a political tool. But you know what? It probably would have made it into a 4-hour movie or a 2-parter or something. So you got to do what you got to do,
And all that ties in perfectly with what I wrote down here. So, movie differences, book differences with Ellie specifically. Again, in the movie, Ellie's mom dies in childbirth. Her dad dies. We'll talk about that scene in a bit. So she basically is, on her own. She's brilliant, graduates high school 2 years early. She's offered professorship, but just chooses to, pursue looking. And it's very that's the Ellie in the movie. In the book, it's a different Ellie, basically. Her mom dies at the end. Her dad still dies when she's young, but there's a stepfather figure who, and Tucker, I know you said maybe you didn't finish it, so I don't know because I think this is on the last few pages. I hope you don't mind me spoiling this, but
no, because like I said, I listened to the audiobook. I just haven't gone through the Kindle with all the notes. So.
Oh, right. So the stepfather ends up being it's this weird twist that in the book it's kind of interesting, but like you were saying just now, Bob, I don't think it would have served any purpose in the movie. But what this twist is that the stepfather is actually her biological father. Can't remember exactly how that went down. I think maybe Ellie's mom.
The mom had an affair.
Yeah. And then her dad Ted was like, well, I'm not mad. Let's raise this child together. And it seemed like cordial as cordial as it could be, I suppose, but it was an interesting reveal, and again serves no purpose to the point of the movie. I think the movie is just focused on this sort of
it was like
one
a
character
device. It was like a giant plot device. There was a letter, right? There's a letter from your dad and all this stuff. I mean, when the mom died, she gets the letter, and it was a powerful plot device, but it was literally on the last 3 pages or whatever.
Right.
Well, I think the book humanizes her much more than the movie does. Movies, everybody's fairly one-dimensional just to save time. Just you can't spend that much time developing a character in 2 hours. Whereas in the book, she is a flawed human. She does get excited when the guy gets killed, and her first thought is, "I get to go." That's not a
great callback.
It humanizes her instead of lionizing her into some altruistic person that. There's varying degrees of good and bad in everybody, but nobody's just all good. You know?
But that makes the sci-fi that much more real. That's what I love about it. You're 100% right. She was a fully fleshed 360-degree living, breathing thing, and to be crushed by. I'm going to jump off that beautiful reference to. She also was so wanting to go visit her mom, and she never did, and it was just it touched me in like this really profound way,
right?
Of like, she was a superhero, she had accomplished these things and she'd done all this stuff, but also obviously the taint of, but her mom supported her. It wasn't like her mom didn't support her, but she never got the courage to go visit her mom and tell, you know what I mean? It was just such a brutal thing.
Every time she's taking the next step of the biggest moment of her life, she has that thought, oh fuck, I haven't called my mom in 2 months.
Exactly. Right. And
There's
it just keeps on, but it just keeps on. It just puts it off and puts it off and puts it off. And that's real life.
Yeah. And there's this line too about there we are, both of us thinking the other one isn't listening, like mother, like daughter, like all those scenes where she is just like, I mean, she's consumed with this, like the greatest discovery in the history of the human species, like, of course. But it is. So a couple of things at the beginning of the book I pulled out that I thought were really interesting, and I included an actual quote from Carl Sagan. It's cool. I actually just talked to my friends at work on Friday about this too. But it's these two things I thought were really, really interesting. But again, from the book. So at the very moment that humans discovered the scale of the universe and found that their most unconstrained fancies were in fact dwarfed by the true dimensions of even the Milky Way galaxy, they took steps that ensured that their descendants would be unable to see the stars at all.
Yep, I highlighted that one as well.
It's that quality that Carl Sagan has. It's that, almost the ominous,
pale blue dot. It makes me think of that. Right?
Yeah, it makes me think of the Demon Haunted World, where he has this foreboding of a future,
Oh yeah, and he nailed it. He just, and that's the thing with Sagan. I think that's why I love him so much. Is he's known as being an astronomer, but he was a Renaissance man. Like he studied everything he could get his hands on. Sociology, philosophy, biology. Like he wanted to understand it all. He was not laser focused on space. He was trying to understand life and reality and the systems that govern us, and really went about it.
Would you say he was inspired by beauty? I mean, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Like a Da Vinci thing, like a Da Vinci thing. Like Da Vinci was the body, like in nature. And being able to document, manipulate, visualize, deconstruct, reconstruct, all these things way in front of anybody else. Nobody else that were his peers could even conceive of what was going on. I think Sagan's like that.
Yeah, I'd agree. Next thing I pulled out of the book. So for 1 million years, humans had grown up with a personal daily knowledge of the vault of heaven. In the last few thousand years, they began building and emigrating to the cities. In the last few decades, a major fraction of the human population had abandoned a rustic way of life. As technology developed and the cities were polluted, the nights became starless. New generations grew to maturity, wholly ignorant of the sky that had transfixed their ancestors and that had stimulated the modern age of science and technology. Without even noticing, just as astronomy entered a golden age, most people cut themselves off from the sky, a cosmic isolationism that ended only with the dawn of space exploration. Fucking really well way to put all that shit, in like a handful of sentences. Yeah.
Dude, it's the equivalency of idiocracy for the science. I mean, honestly, when you remove the ability of the human animal to adapt to its environment, it can't progress any further. And so there's this, right? So you're having, so he's inspired. What is he inspired by? The beauty. Well, the beauty of what? What he can literally see and how it feels to look up at night and gaze and wonder. And so everything is predicated on that.
Yeah.
Everything. So he writes this book. So even if you're in a cave and you can't go see this thing and wonder, he's now inspired you. He's translated this thing. The idiocracy is, what happens when there's no one left to translate the original message?
Yeah.
And it's literally lost in translation. You've literally lost the connection between the original reality and all the metaphors down the line, all these compressions of this idea and re-encapsulations and reframings of this thing. which is what art is, and we all love it. But once you get away from the source, how many times can you get away from that source before you lose? Let me go back to the Matrix. How do they know what cream of wheat really tastes like?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And the way that, oh, go ahead.
That's kind of what worries me about some of these younger generations and the way they consume media. I mean, you have your TikToks, you have your YouTube videos, so we're ranging from several minutes to 2 hours. How much information can you really convey in that amount of time? Like, you can't talk about big ideas like that. That has to be written and spoken word and discussions. It's not something you can consume. Like, you have to be an active participant in it.
Yeah. Because without the active participation, it's like you're kind of left to your own devices. So you see that 30-second thing that's like, hey, this happened. I don't like to say you, but like a person, right, might see the 30 seconds of something and then just be consumed by what their brain comes up with after that. And if you keep that to yourself, if a person keeps that to themselves, like, it just seems like less likely to be constructive, I guess, outcome than if, like you said, Tucker, if a person is able to share those thoughts and converse, and like, when you start to talk about truth, it's like that's where the scientific method comes in, and it's so important to kind of think about that.
Hold on one second. I think my disconnect isn't with the time aspect, but it is with the inability to verbalize, meaning when it's a little dance they're doing. And I'm not disparaging dancing. I love, the art and all the rest. That's not what I'm talking about. But if you are filling your consciousness with a stream of little TikTok dances or whatever, how would you verbalize that? How are you going to abstract that experience into something universal that you will use for the rest of your life? You see what I'm getting at? So even like a cartoon or something, like, let's say you're watching the Smurfs, and they're Smurfette's being chased by who's the bad guy? I can't remember the guy's name. Anyway,
Gargamel.
Thank you, Gargamel. Yeah, Gargamel,
something like that.
I think the cat is Azimuth or something like that. The little cat Azimuth. Anyway, so you could make it into a morality play. Okay, the kid can then. What did you watch? What did you watch, little one? Oh, I watched this show about this thing, and they had a conflict, and it was resolved, and at the end, everybody's happy. Okay, very good, very good. They were a team. Okay, very good. How do you encapsulate, or how do you put into words so much of what is social media likes, like what I don't understand, like, what I mean, like you get a physical pleasure out of watching someone move and watching their body and their face, and if you personally put yourself out there, you get a dopamine rush when you get likes and views and comments, and it's visceral and it's addictive, and it's animal feedback. You're definitely going to do more of this thing, and it's going to feed back to you, showing you exactly what you like. What I'm saying is, if you cannot verbalize it, though, to Tucker's point, is it like an empty calorie? Is it like a weight?
That's a really interesting way to put that. Yeah. So what we'll have to do is we'll have to do an actual episode on this topic. I think it makes me think of when I was younger and Beavis and Butthead was like all the rage, and I remember watching it, and I remember my dad coming in and just being like, there is no redeeming quality in this. How can you watch this?
And so
by the way,
as somebody who's watched,
I love
that,
that,
by
the way. Right?
Watched the new ones. I've watched the new ones because there's a couple new seasons in the last few years, and your dad's right. There's absolutely nothing redeeming about it. They're just stupid. It's just the dumbest shit you can put in your head.
Hold on,
but it's entertaining.
I guarantee if I went and watched, there is some form of a morality play afoot.
Oh, sure.
That's what we should do. That's what we should do for when we do an episode on this, is we should maybe I'll come with 2 or 3, or maybe even try to just pull up random TikToks and that's our assignment, right? That's our goal, is to find the redeeming quality of this. Like, how
that's a good call.
Because when you mentioned the dancing thing, it's like, well, my mind kind of went to a dancer whose profession is to do all these crazy dance moves or whatever, and keep their body in the fit state to be able to do this stuff and coordinate stuff. All that shit's super fascinating to me. And I was like, that that's the redeeming quality.
Well, I can see it as here's to get to the heart of this, which I think is a really good place to be on this, because it's fascinating. The body language that is accumulated, like a library of these things that one can refer to another person in a physical reference, meaning like you dance like I dance, you know this dance like I know this dance, we're now good. It reminds me of this thing. I don't know if you guys know this word called shibboleth. You guys familiar with shibboleth?
Shibboleth. How do you know spell it?
SHIBO LETH. Shibboleth.
No, I've seen it.
Yeah, I was say it. In my mind it seems familiar, but
so it's this. I think it's Hebrew is original,
yep.
And what it means is a word that your pronunciation of defines your in group and your out group. So if you come to me and you try to pretend you're from my small town, but you don't pronounce the name of this one place that we all know locally the same way we do, you're fucked. Okay, so the dance is this version of a social shibboleth.
Yep.
By the way, topical reference or semi-topical. Sam Bankman-Fried. Bankman-Fried.
Oh, the crypto guy that got
He has this published interview he did over instant message right after he got caught, or right after this thing blew up, and he was still trying to spin what is going on. And Google that, because he brings up the fact that the reporter asked him, how did you think you were going to get away with doing this thing? And he was like, well, it's very easy. I know the right shibboleth. I say it's going to be effective altruism, right? And I tell them what they want to hear. I speak it the right way, and they give me the money. And so it's this manipulation of the ability to have essentially a library of dance moves that you can pull off to ingratiate yourself. And what I'm getting to at the heart of it is that it's human nature, John. Like, to your point, It's not insignificant. It's not a minor thing. My point, I think, to Tucker's point, is it's so hard to verbalize.
Yeah.
Other than the fact that your pronunciation of something sometimes gives you away, whether you're from that place or not, or you're in the in group, or you're just learning. You may, if you mispronounce something, we all know how to speak. You're showing your weakness. Anyway, I think it is a fascinating little snippet of the human psychology.
Yeah,
well,
absolutely.
And I think what kind of worries me is that in our comfort, we've become a civilization that largely consumes art, which is not a bad thing, but we're not consuming knowledge at the same speed that we used to. There's so much out there that you could literally live your whole life just consuming art and never, grow a new neuron from it.
Well, maybe, but just a different kind of neuron, I suppose. This is like a beautiful segue into the quote I pulled out as a shibboleth thing. I think is appropriate here too, but certainly what you're talking about, Tucker, and again, just to another example of Carl Sagan's prophetic quality. He had this quote from 1990. We live in a society exquisitely dependent on science and technology, in which hardly anyone knows anything about science and technology.
Yep.
Boom. Yeah.
And that was in 1990.
It's about ignorance. It's about using these tools that you are not qualified to understand. And that's a dangerous thing. Carl Sagan hit that out of the park, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really fascinating.
I don't know why anybody still talks about Nostradamus when you have Sagan, because that dude was the prophet if there was one. Like, he saw it all coming.
Well, play it forward. And John, you have this in there, and I'm going to play this forward because I have the connection in my head. When the alien guy embodied in Ellie's dad says, when she's like, where are everybody? Well, the ones that really wanted to expand, the ones that really reached out, they all killed themselves eventually. Like the ones that, were just massive expansionists, consumerists, they eat themselves eventually, right? I mean, I can't remember the exact line. Do you know what I'm talking about, John?
Yeah, it definitely had to do with the aggressive ones. I think the word aggressive.
Thank
Is
you.
that I might be able to find that here. Yeah, in the long run, the aggressive civilizations destroy themselves almost always. I like that I'm very particular about always and never absolutes.
Yep.
Like, you
Almost.
guys know that about me, but I like that
Only the Sith. Only the Sith deals in absolutes.
Yeah.
Very good meme reference there. Yeah, so we've got this concept, which is a Sagan classic, though, of having what do you want to call it, the understanding being lost, I guess you could say.
Yeah, right. Maybe this is kind of like,
so when you're hyper aggressive, okay, what is it for? Like, so going back to, like, let's counter to what Tucker was saying about knowledge. Well, what's the knowledge for? Let's just say you're like, why are we without knowledge? Well, what's the knowledge for? Maybe the knowledge is to feel good, but maybe if I just look at the dance, I already feel good. So what's the knowledge for? Like, there's a disconnect sometimes of, like, what are we doing here? And I'm saying, like, if you look at our box, like, we're in an environment, we're a creature that's in a cage of sorts, and we're responding to this environment. And as logically as we want to dial this thing in of why we're doing what we're doing, and what we're doing is, our own free will, we're really just kind of, trying to get into what feels good and then narrate why we did that after the fact. Let's be honest.
Yeah, right. There's a lot to that. It's why I think, conversation's so important. Again, back to the verbalization, and just being able to
Love it.
be open and talk about these things, I feel like, is really important groundwork for whatever the point is.
That's what brings the understanding, right? So there's a knowledge and then there's an understanding. And so I guess, like, knowledge for the sake of knowledge, I don't know. Is it better than a dance? Well, probably not when you're 16 and horny, probably looking at jiggly boobies and stuff. It's probably,
right.
like par for the course. If I was 13 again, I know what I'd be doing on TikTok, right? But getting to a level of understanding isn't really a function of accumulating massive amounts of knowledge. It's like the right knowledge. And that's why Sagan and art is so important. Like, making a metaphor that expresses that understanding so that its uptake is on the subconscious level. That's the shit you want, right? That's the good stuff.
Yeah.
So I want to segue for a minute just to talk about SETI. And this was a conversation that Daigle and I kind of had at some point, and I was told I need to remember that point so we can discuss it. And part of the thing is, it's disheartening that here we are, 30 years later, and we ain't heard a damn thing. Like, nothing.
Yeah.
And, I get interested in the UFO stuff about once a decade, because there's enough out there to make you think there might be something to it, but there's no concrete evidence.
There's no contact moment for sure.
There's no contact moment. But when I was thinking about it, it's like, okay, if there was anything that could travel here, that means they're somehow traveling faster than light. They're somehow using wormholes, they're bending space-time, they're doing whatever. Now, at that point, there's no use for light-based communication. There's no need for radio, there's no need for lasers, because you could always physically travel somewhere to deliver that message quicker than you could with any form of communication that is dependent on light. So if we're talking about a very advanced species, yeah, we may not hear anything because they may not be broadcasting anything. What's sad to me is that we don't hear anything, which means there's nobody even on the spectrum of technology detectable.
I think I'm gonna be both optimistic and a little pessimistic. I don't think we're ever going to hear anything with light-based or radio waves. Not a thing. I think gravitational waves, that's the universe's way of communicating. So we're just now being able to hear the loudest bang you could possibly make in the universe, slamming black holes together or neutron stars or whatever. Eventually, we're going to be able to hear what I think is the background hum of communication, shortwave radio style, back to contact, and that's what it's going to be. It's going to be gravitational waves for sure.
And I can see that, and I think they're in the next decade or so they're actually going to launch. I think it's like 3 satellites, spread them way out, and be able to detect waves much better than we can currently.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But it's still ridiculously. I mean, the tech is so lock solid. I mean, it's just not going to be a problem to scale this thing up, and it's all about implementation on large scales to get the sensitivity up. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a thing, 100%. I think if you could say there's no background gravitational wave thing, then we're probably going to be like, oh shit, because I don't know how many further places you can go to get a signal. I think, once you exclude the light-based signaling, I don't know. I just don't even know. I think that's a really optimistic place to go to.
Yeah. If it's in my lifetime, I can't wait.
Yeah, I mean, literally, it's here. It's just a matter of scaling it and making it better. And who knows? I mean, literally, they could be reading the news right now to us, and we don't even know. Because we're not even listening in the right way.
Yeah.
I mean, there could literally be like, today's news report at the Milky Way news is, blah blah blah, and we just don't even realize they're playing it on gravitational waves, right?
Yeah.
Right. Oops, sorry, we didn't know you were a light-based creature. Sorry, Bob.
Well, and I'm going to pull a quote from the book because he clearly saw it, back then, and it just says, when she thought about it carefully, she was surprised that in the search for ETs, what could be done was so far ahead of what had been done. The resources that had been devoted to this question were trifling, and she was hard-pressed to name a more important scientific problem.
Yeah.
Oh, when it happens, if it happens, let's be honest. If it happens, it will be the most, because this is the thing, and Sagan knows, it will unify the world.
Yep.
Yeah.
In a way that you cannot simulate or estimate or, do a probabilistic study. I just don't think you can possibly understand. I can't. Nobody can. You can't unring that bell, first of all. Like, once there's a knowledge of this thing, it's just going to be everything. I get goosebumps even just, I making an idea about it. It's so fascinating.
Well, yeah. which leads me to, you've got all these whistleblowers coming out saying, yes, we have these craft, we have recovered bodies. There is stuff tied up in defense contractors that is, buried in classification systems that, you just can't get to. So it's like, if you take that statement as true, then you have a group of people who probably have read Sagan and probably know that this would be a unifying event. And they don't want it to happen. They don't want it to happen because they profit off of the military-industrial complex that is based on us being divided.
Grabbing an alien body, putting it in your trunk, and driving to downtown Manhattan and opening that fucker up is the greatest thing of all time. There's nobody who wouldn't do that, dude. Your name would live on for all ages.
I agree. But once you get the military involved, they don't want us to be unified. Their whole business model is that we're a planet of nations who are a threat to each other, and we have to have the funding. Constantly have to have the funding to protect from that threat. If we're unified, that threat goes away, right?
100%. But I'm saying the psyop is what is happening. If it were anything real, someone would grab that alien body or anything incontrovertible alien, and they would be the most famous person on Earth. And there ain't nobody who is going to put the military over that. I'm sorry, it just ain't going to happen. They're going to justify after the fact, while they're cashing the $1 billion, I'm the most famous person on Earth check. They're gonna justify why that was the most rational and open-hearted move for all of mankind. And it would be, honestly. I mean, to hide that from everything, meaning from public consumption, that's a great sin. That's akin to burning down a library. I mean, literally,
absolutely.
Like architectural arson. I mean, you're fucked in all of history. If you were ever someone on that side of the field that you kept that from everybody, fuck you.
But to counter that, it's easy for us to say that because of the type of people we are. But Somebody
fair.
burnt down the Library of Alexandria.
Totally.
There are people who are totally willing for personal gain to fuck everybody. Literally every other person on the planet.
That's a valid point. I get you. Irrationality is reigns supreme, honestly. It's more likely than the
that's why I find the topic interesting, but it's like I get into it for about 6 months every 10 years because you hit a wall. The possibilities are all there. You know, there's one guy who talks about, you know, they in certain levels of government and military, they do personality testing. And so his claim is that, you know, they only pick the people for these programs who have that personality type that they're willing to fuck everybody else over to be part of that club.
Yeah, it's gnarly.
And it is. There's no way to prove anything. And that's why after about 6 months, I'm like, hey, I'm done with this. Like, 'cause you can't until that signal comes.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be
from the public.
I discount, and this is my own prejudice, I discount out of hand any physical reality manifestation on this planet of anything alien. I just discount it 100%, 99.9999999%. It's literally not even conceivably probabilistically on my radar screen. It's going to be a signal, is what I'm saying. There's going to be some kind of a signal. To make it a physical interaction is the first source of contact, to me, is so improbable. But I almost guarantee that there's life, you know, scattered throughout the universe, teeming throughout the universe. But at scale,
otherwise,
I think there's probably life in our solar system.
It's possible.
It's not, you know, you look at not intelligent, but you look at Europa, you look at you know, some of these moons of Jupiter. The conditions are there.
Totally. Yeah. I 100% would grant that, but you're not going to make contact with them unless you're going there or like there's no signal. So I'm talking about the Sagan-esque intelligent life, because his proposition obviously is not just that it would be a waste of space. I don't want to step on his line, but you know, it's amazing waste of space if there's nobody else out there. It's meaning like intelligence, like someone you could have a conversation with. So I guess at that point, I'm thinking the intelligent way of exploring the universe is not to fly around in flying saucers. Even if you could, it would be to send a signal. I mean, but back to Tucker's point, maybe you have faster than light travel, so maybe it is optimal to actually physically be there, in which case I would have to be convinced of faster than light travel first, I guess.
Sure. And we're nowhere near that.
Yeah.
I mean, the other thing is I think robotics would probably be the...
Totally. That's a good point.
You know, for exploration, you're going to send a probe.
Totally. Yeah, that's a very good point. Then you get into 2001, and I love that shit too. We should do that, by the way.
Yeah, right. Well, at the risk of digging even deeper into this whole thing, just because this did come up at work, when I told you I was chatting with my buddies, and I talked about that Carl Sagan quote, and my friend said, just to go back to the unifying piece of a signal, you know, his take is that it would have to be a threat. If it was a global threat, that's what would unify us all. And that kind of ties into what you said, Tucker, about like right now, the military-industrial complex or whatever is based on us not being unified as a global species. But I'm curious what you guys think about that, because I'm much more
the signal,
of
John, the signal would come from light years away, and there's no fear from that. So the proximate nature of the first contact is what would drive the propaganda. Meaning, if you want to create fear, it has to be the aliens are here. The aliens are here. You can't say the aliens are sending us, you know, their news from fucking 4,000, you know, light years away or whatever. You just can't.
Yeah, but I just mean, like, do you think that? What are your thoughts about that? Like, does it take an actual threat? Does it have to be a threat against all of us in order to unite us, or could it be
threat or opportunity? It's one of those two. It's got to be an opportunity then.
Yeah,
like,
I like
life
that.
On Europa, like life on Europa would be such an opportunity. Like let's just say not just life, but very similar carbon-based life that uses, you know, some kind of genetic material that's similar to ours, such that, we can see it would be compatible with us being in their environment. Like it would be amazing, right? Like if we had a planet we could go to and humans could strive to unite and put a plan together and pool resources and put a team and 5 astronauts and all the rest. I think it really is an opportunistic problem that we could solve as a planet versus there's an asteroid coming. The flip side is the asteroid's coming. It's not an alien, it's an asteroid. We got to unite to blow this asteroid up or we're all going to die.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if it hits the ocean, or it doesn't matter if it's China, or if it hits America. It doesn't matter. It's going to kill us all. So we're all going to pool together and, launch the 5 astronauts, and they're going to go divert the asteroid.
Yeah. Yeah, I think there's truth about that. If it was the more threatening it is, the more likely we would probably band together. But I am a softie, and I like the idea that that's not the only thing. It wouldn't have to be. Like there is some kind of opportunity probably that we could all still get.
The downside would be if it was a function of interpretation. So if you just get a signal that's ambiguous, or it's like it's obviously intelligent. Let's just say it's primes. Let's say they just give you a string of primes. Well, what does that mean? How would you interpret that, right? There's no clear course. So that could be a dividing feature of the first contact. Whereas having plans sent to you, build this machine. Now we're going somewhere, right? Now, unless you're like it's a trap, which I love that in the book. Maybe it's a trap. That's how that's
Trojan
how they
horse.
kill you.
Yeah.
Trojan horse you. They just you put all the work into it. It's like, hey, this is their old joke about, defeating capitalists. Not only are you going to hang them, you'll sell them the rope, right? I mean, this is
yeah.
Right? Once you get someone hooked on the concept, you can play them. And so I think it's a fascinating tension in the style of contact. Meaning, is it physical? Is it a signal? If it's a signal, is it ambiguous? Is it clear? Is it an opportunistic signal? Do this and you'll be free, or is it a threat? If you don't do this, I'm going to blow you up. I mean, there's many different ways to play this. I think it's fascinating to discuss.
Yeah, exactly. Great segue back to the source material here. So because there is the line, this kind of flows into the next parts of the movie, but in the book, because they're talking about the radio telescopes in general, and I think this is in the part of the book where she's still young, perhaps, but from Ellie's perspective, it says someday she mused there might in fact, and not just in fantasy, be a message received by one of the great radio telescopes. So some nice foreshadowing. And then, so in the movie, there's the scene at the Arecibo site in South America. And I don't think that's really in the book very much, if I remember right. But in the movie,
I don't think so either.
Yeah. In the movie, it serves to introduce the Matthew McConaughey character, Palmer Joss, who is the love interest. I think in the book, Ellie has a different love interest first, maybe, and then maybe. But Palmer Joss is sort of the antithesis. He's a man of the cloth without the cloth. She doesn't realize at first. I mean, he just kind of introduced himself. He's writing a book about technology and how it affects cultures and things. But there was a really interesting scene in the movie where he doesn't go into detail. I kind of wish they would have maybe described it in more detail, but maybe that's sort of the point. But he's basically telling Ellie why he believes in God. And he just says something about laying there and genuinely not being afraid of dying. And he just says it was God. So what exactly happened, I don't know. But what's interesting is Ellie says, do you think it's possible it was just something that you needed to experience? And when I rewatched it, I was like, that's also kind of foreshadowing, because even though, again, to jump to the end and spoil everything, even though I believe like this thing actually happened to her, that's part of the conversation now. Like, is it something, because it was so specific to her, is it's all that kind of, was it, what factor of that whole experience was because she needed that experience? I think it's really trippy to think about.
Well,
go ahead.
I really love the end of the movie where it's the politician who basically wrote the whole thing off and it didn't work, and then he's talking to the other lady at the end, and she goes, "Now I know you said that, the instruments just recorded static," and he's like, "Yeah," and he's like, "But what you never said is that they recorded 18 hours
of it." Yeah. He's like, that is interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was really brilliant. Really brilliant. Because, and also like in the movie things, it's kind of like, okay, logically that wouldn't have happened. They wouldn't have gone through this whole trial and like bared that. Although maybe they would have,
This is the inversion of the book, though. In the book, Sagan makes it where they cut the signal like it's impossible. It's literally impossible to do what they did. Whereas in the movie, they're kind of giving you this little reassurance of, oh, well, they do have evidence. It's okay. It's okay. And what I'm getting at is what Tucker was saying. It's the magic. And it's faith is not knowing how the trick is done, but still believing they did it.
Yeah.
And so,
again, the themes of that in book and the movie are just so brilliant, so brilliantly done,
But there's a really, if I can digress here for a second, guys.
Yeah.
There's a really powerful psychological thought experiment that I think we should bring up. This is about the difference between essentially quanta and qualia, like the experience of something. So imagine a thought experiment. Imagine there's this lady who lives in a tower, and we'll call her Mary. And Mary, in her world, there is nothing but black and white. So everything in her tower is black or white. That's all she sees. But she is an educated woman. She's like a professor level, and her topic of study is the color red. And so she has learned everything, hypothetically. She's learned everything there is to know factually about the color red. Yet she has lived her entire life inside of this building that is nothing but black or white. And obviously the books she reads are black and white. So would she then, having presumably, I'm just saying, factual knowledge of everything about the color red, every fact, every figure, every concept you could possibly come up about the color red, but would she or would she not learn anything new if she walked out the door and saw a red apple?
Right. Just for the first time in her life.
Correct.
That
so is there a difference between
experience.
Mary? Yeah, exactly. So Mary, who knows everything, every fact and figure, nothing will change, versus Mary, who now has recognized a stoplight or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
Is there something different there? What do you think?
Right.
That's the heart of this faith thing. Because here's the point.
Right.
She knows everything about red, but she's never seen it. So you could have an actual working knowledge of literally everything about a thing, whatever that means to you, but not actually having experienced it. So that is faith, right? I mean, like there's this component of like
a gram of experience is worth a ton of theory, or whatever. Yeah,
exactly.
Observation.
Exactly.
But yeah, I think the real question, like, really, it comes down to is like, is it possible someone can imagine their brain to operate in a way that it would operate through that experience? I don't know. Probably not.
I pulled a quote that even talks about this, and he says, it was like trying to visualize a new primary color or a world in which you could recognize several hundred acquaintances individually only by their smells. Precisely. She could talk about this, but she couldn't experience it.
Yes.
Beautiful. Awesome.
So Sagan, this is the third rail. Then we talked about the other two. This is the third thing, is this faith thing that he has this tension. Back to the story, John, of course, where Ellie is now got a love interest who's a man of the cloth without the cloth. I mean, he doesn't get more direct. It's right on the fucking nose, right? I mean, they're kind of like, this is the point of the show. This is what he's like bringing these, because it's not a very realistic concept, but putting the pieces together in the way he does forces a thought experiment. And that's what's so beautiful about it.
Yeah.
Because in the book, Palmer Joss isn't really the antagonist. It's the other evangelical preacher who's really just the, he's the problem. Palmer Joss is more like I believe this because I was struck by lightning and I died and I saw God and I came back. And that's why I believe what I do is because I had this experience, where the other guy is like, I'm like this just because everybody in my family's always been like this, and I read this book, and this is the only book I need, and everybody should follow my direction because of my understanding of this one book.
It's the
like
symbol,
he's the antagonist,
but it's the symbol he experienced the death experience, and that's the thing, right? It wasn't from a knowledge; it was he went through it, and now he's awakened from it.
So is that what it was in the book? He got struck by lightning, and then Okay, cool. I forgot that. Yeah, in the movie, I'm pretty sure there really isn't a lot of detail about what exactly happened. Really,
but it's also, I think it's interesting in the book. He's struck by lightning, but it's while he's like, I believe it's while he's preaching, or he's around a bunch of religious people at the time, and they say they just kind of put hands on him and shook him, and that's what brought him back from the dead. And so it was like God's will that he came back, because that's what they told him.
Or something.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But I think Palmer Joss is kind of a character. Maybe Sagan. Sagan doesn't talk a lot about being an atheist. I think he talks more about not seeing the evidence for a God as described by religion. I think Palmer Joss is his way of leaving that door cracked. That I can't prove that there is no God. I can't prove that there is.
He's an empiricist.
Yes.
So you can't have a proof of a negative.
Exactly.
So I love it. That's exactly where he goes with this thing. That's precisely on the nail, hitting the nail on the head. And by the way, to his credit, few in the science community, let alone the science communication community, ever get that. And they come off as assholes. You know what I'm saying? Because they really cannot play the full logical conclusion of being an empiricist. And they're too haughty to even have the chance that it could be, someone of faith or whatever. Someone else has a direct connection to an experience that leads them to truth that they can't observe, or whatever you want to call it, right? I mean, it's like this level, and this is not Sagan, this is what he's poking fun at, I think. It's the level of certitude that the people, that just a generation before, science community, that just a generation before invalidated the previous generation's community that thought they'd figured it all out, who had invalidated the previous generation's community who thought they'd figured it all out, etc. Regressing back to the beginning of science. And so Sagan is so honest in that what we think we know today and the facts that I'm telling you and all the rest, they're on their face going to be proven wrong in 30, 40, 50 years.
Sure.
And being humble enough to understand what the implications are.
Yeah.
In my own personal experience, I was raised Catholic. I ran away from that in teenage years and probably spent most of my 20s being, I would say, militant atheist, anti-religion. But, it's in some ways, the more I learn as I age, the more I understand what we can't know. And
are we reactionary the other way? Both are reactions,
Are we ever going to be able to physically...
By the way, it's exactly the same as me. It's so funny that you say that. It's 100%.
Are we ever going to physically be able to observe what happens past the event horizon of a black hole? No, I don't think we will. I don't think it's physically possible to send something in there and observe what's there. Well, maybe that's where God lives. I can't. You have to be willing to say that it's unknowable. Like, it's just not, like, I see no evidence for an Abrahamic God. Maybe there is one and he's just been on vacation. Like, I don't,
this is a very powerful philosophical crux, which is strong versus weak atheism. So strong atheism is, I believe there is no God. Weak atheism is, I don't have a belief in God. So this is the tension of the atheistic community, and it is a universal problem of how confident are you, if you're empirically deriving your knowledge base, that you can exclude things you haven't measured, or they're impossible to measure, etc. So this is a very deep-seated philosophical conundrum that Sagan tied into this book. Genius, by the way, to tie all that in with all the rest, by the way.
Well, and what I think's interesting, and I know I've been guilty of it, and I think everybody has, is, it's easy to say, well, Christians believe this or atheists believe this. There's 30,000 denominations of Christianity around the world. Like, there's probably 30,000 ways that atheists differ just the same. It's like there is no one unified belief. There are people constantly picking parts from here and there and go, this is what I believe. It's not a unified thing. It never has been and it never will be. I mean, there was 13 original colonies because they were all different flavors of Christianity that wanted their own little piece to create their new world in their image. It's never been unified.
Would you agree it's like a petri dish where it's got like a sampling of different colonies that grow and disappear and grow and disappear, and then they mutate and they go over to this other area of the petri dish, and like we're slime mold. I mean, we're like a functional slime mold. But hold on. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Slime molds have been shown to be able to solve mazes. Are you guys familiar with this?
I think I have read something about that, yeah.
So just on a nutrient dish, they could have like a special source of extra nutrients. And the way the slime mold tentacles out, I don't know if that's the right verb, but the way it progresses its growth pattern will be able to solve a maze in the shortest distance possible, getting to the resource. And then once it attaches to that resource, it reinforces that pathway. Anyway, my point is, a lot of what we're doing is justification of this random, how would you put it? A random conjunction of environment and opportunity-seeking social creatures. Like put us into any environment that has an opportunity, we will socialize and form a team to go get it. And that's what we have, is just a series of expansions and contractions that if you plot it, it would probably look very much like a slime mold.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well, we're forever going to do it, is my point. It's not a choice. It's not free will. It's not, what we do is we do this thing, and then after the fact, we explain why we did it continuously. But it's always going to be, I need to capture resources, and I need to secure myself from competition and, predation. Period.
There was a show on years ago, and I want to say it was on History Channel. I don't remember what it was called, but it kind of looked at some of the underlying reasons that geographically countries are the way they are. And like the interesting one for America was like, if you look at the early roads and even rail systems that were built, it all had to do with salt. And it was plotting routes between salt deposits the most efficiently. And it's something you don't even, like in modern times, we don't even think about it. Salt's something we just pick up at the store, but it wasn't always like that.
I think that's practical.
You had to have
spices and all the rest. I mean, throughout all of history, Asia and throughout all parts have traded. That's what it comes as commerce, which, strangely enough, like trying to connect different ports or whatever, right? I mean, that's how you find the next pathway through.
And the other interesting one was, if you look at all the ancient empires, the Mongols, the Romans, they started to collapse when they expanded to the point that the cities were more than 2 weeks by horseback away from the capital. Because once you got that big, you could not communicate with the head fast enough to control what the feet is doing. You lost that ability to control that remote city because it's too far away from the capital. And it happened to all of them. They grew too big, and they had to spread resources too far, and they couldn't communicate fast enough to react to the external threats anymore. And those outside cities started falling, and then it's just it's an implosion from there, and the next empire starts taking over.
It reminds me of the classic wooden shoes up the stairs, silk slippers down the stairs.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So once you get the hard work to conquer your foe and then establish your capital where his capital was, and then to start branching out, that's the wooden shoes. Once you've got all the stuff and now you've expanded way beyond your communicative range, silk slippers, brother, you're gonna slide down those stairs, guaranteed.
Yeah, interesting. I'm trying to think of like transitions back into the movie. And I was gonna go
run away from the plot here.
No, it's great. I love it.
That's what we do.
Yeah.
We do, yeah.
I was gonna say, speaking of slime molds, the other character that gets introduced is David Drumlin. No, but he's kind of a slimy guy. And then when Tucker, you were talking about like the further away, and specifically like the head doesn't know what the feet is doing, and there's maybe like the head is sort of blind to the feet. Speaking of blind, there's the blind character that gets introduced.
Very good.
So this is good. I need this practice. But anyway, so yeah, but those are two other characters introduced in the Arecibo area, and I like the Kent Clark. He's the blind character. He pays off at the end. That's pretty cool. Just that kind of embodies that idea that like because he can't see, maybe he's developed higher sense of hearing or something, and then David Drumlin is again sort of another antagonist almost, because he's this guy who seems to show up anytime something really good happens to Ellie. It's like, oh yeah, this guy again. Yeah. And in the Arecibo area, he's basically saying like, you're wasting your time searching for extraterrestrial life. Like this is a waste. And then as soon as they find it, he's like, yeah, this is good. He starts to get credit for it and all that stuff. So that's when he's introduced.
So that's the whole point, by the way. That is what I say that the consciousness is doing. Like it's thinking, it's telling you what's happening. This character, he says, you can't do this. You're ruining your career. Right. I'm pulling your funding for your own good. I'm doing this for your own good.
Right.
And then when she turns out to be right, I supported her, and
and he kind of takes credit for it too. It's kind of like you see, that's the slime, that's the slime reference. So
yes, but what I'm saying is, Sagan is portraying human nature. So the human nature is to justify after the decision has been made.
Yeah, good point.
So that's what this guy does. Anything that happens, once he makes the rational decision, I'm going to do what's in my best interest. After the fact, why? Why did I do that? Well, the science. It's the whatever. That's what I'm saying. Like this is Sagan's caricature of human consciousness.
Yeah.
He sums up the whole attitude that's kind of talked about early on in the book. And she's talking about how she'd be sitting in lectures, and the professor would say, "Gentlemen, let's begin." And then he'd see her and go, "Sorry, Miss Arroway, I just think of you as one of the boys." And the quote was, "The highest compliment they were capable of paying, that in their mind, she was not overtly female."
Yeah, right.
Yeah. And like that's just that slime ball from the movie where you're just like, well, yeah, I have the dick, so I get to take all the credit for this. Clearly,
Politics, my friend. Politics.
Yeah, and the history of our species, I mean, like that was, there's generations, like dozens, hundreds maybe, right, of generations where the woman is subservient to the man, right? Yeah. So, and that's one of the reasons I'm really glad to be alive right now, because I really think like a lot of people are kind of seeing the just inherent nonsensicalness of that, of just the one thing, like you said, born with a dick, first place. Otherwise,
well, and so
come on.
Like my wife is very type A personality, and we work in construction. Like she is the heart of our company. Like it would literally the wheels would fall off without her, because she's the one who reads the contracts and understands all the government regulations and makes sure that we're doing legit business, right? But there are people in our organization who will just talk over her or ignore her, probably due to her size and being a female. And so we have this whole joke where I was like, you need to say that more penisingly. Like,
oh yeah.
like,
yeah.
You got to say it like you have a dick.
Yeah.
But she was because she's in NAWIC, which is National Association of Women in Construction, and she's very involved with that. She's going to be the president of the chapter next year. But it was one of the speakers at one of the conferences she was at who said something that was so mind-blowing to me that I will never forget it. And she basically said, "You need to say things with the confidence of a mediocre white man." And I was just like, holy shit. I would like to shake her hand because that is absolutely the most profound thing I've heard in a while. Like, just the average run-of-the-mill white American dude will say the most ridiculous shit like they are an authority on it, and I just expect it to be taken at face value. And
just because of that, just because of dick and white skin.
Yeah.
And again, I think we're, as a species, kind of growing up from that sort of maybe, I don't know, immature or unevolved type of. I mean, obviously, there's more to it than just the sex organ and the color of your skin, right? Obviously, right?
Yeah.
It unironically goes back to, and this is, a call back to anybody who's listened to previous episodes. I don't know when we talked about this, but the division of the players on the team, the map makers, map readers, followers, and brokers, such that a lot of what is going on is justification of moves that are unknown to the person themselves. They're mimicking, they're following, they're, like I said, they're doing a thing that they feel is in their best interest, and then after the fact, trying to justify these things. And this is a historical phenomenon, meaning it's evolved with humans. So as we have evolved, let's be honest, the vast majority of our evolutionary history has not been as a civilized animal.
No.
So the pattern of behavior, the historical, cultural references that have co-evolved, because I believe culture is a living thing, by the way.
Yeah.
I'm not going to jump too far off of Sagan's book, but I believe that the culmination of all of our languages and foods and arts and clothing and everything that we express, it lives on its own. It lives in an idealistic capacity as a pattern. Let's just say it's not physically alive, but it lives as a pattern would live. And that pattern evolves. That pattern passes on from person to person. And my point is this: the only reason the pattern is there is for fitness. And so we're in this transitionary period where there's an old pattern overlaid on a new form of fitness, which is the equality of the sexes, specifically at the intellectual level. So imagine how much brain capacity was forfeited for like 99.9% of human evolutionary history. But, not saying it can't start necessarily at the end. So let's just say today's the end where we have, let's just say equality. It's not, but let's just say it is. You can't necessarily always start at the end. So it makes sense that there was a pattern of behavior looking from a primitive grouping of, humans or proto-humans that evolves over time, not just physically, but culturally. And that cultural overlay is something that can change at a speed that is not biologically capable of recognition. Like the biology doesn't change with the same rapidity as the culture could change.
Yeah.
So
and
you
technology
get into
fits in there too, right? Just the speed of the change.
100%,
like we can't keep up with it.
100%. Yeah, we've externalized our change to this mechanistic device that changes on our behalf, and it changes faster. So it's not just change, but it's speed of change.
Yeah.
The point is, evolution doesn't work like that. Biology doesn't work like that. So we are now, and this is the beauty of humanity, you could put us underwater where we're not evolved to live, or in space where we're not evolved to live, and all these places we can go where we were not evolved to live. It's the flexibility that is our gift. But what I'm getting at is there's another living component that evolves, and that's this cultural overlay of how the players on the team, so the followers specifically, how the followers are playing their hand, how they're playing their game, and much of the resource that they're pulling from to make these determinations are culturally based. So it's going to be what it always happens, where you have, some unifying force, an opportunity or a threat. You'll have some leadership step up, and then the reality hits, and those who didn't follow the leader, assuming the leader is the one after the fact who was right, then everybody else who didn't follow them gets wiped off the map, so to speak, and the game resets again, and they do another iteration over and over and over again. And then they get to slime mold. So you get slime mold. You're just doing these iterations of these little experiments of a colony here, a colony there, a colony here, a colony there. They expand, they contract, and most of them die out.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like a misconception on society, that we're progressing towards. Progress isn't linear. It's like, if you look at, I'll give religion credit where credit's due. I think religion took tribes and built towns, and then built states, and then built nations, and then built empires. And then what happened? The religion splits into these different denominations, and that empire collapses into smaller nation states and towns. And so it's not hold
right
society
there.
And culture is not linear. We're not heading in a direction. It's a living thing. It evolves, and it takes turns that we never see coming.
Tucker, would you agree that if you end up having everybody pronounce the word the same way, it loses its function as a shibboleth?
Sure.
So that's what we're talking about, is it can grow to such a proportion where there is no differentiation, and then you kind of lose the benefit of having an in-group and an out-group, in that there's some kind of internal competition going on. It's this crazy tension, but it continuously evolves between, being technologically advanced enough that it promotes what you're trying to, it gives you a longer lever, versus being so technologically advanced, you put Mountain Dew on your crops because you don't know what the fuck you're doing.
Yeah. Well, and I think, COVID was the perfect example of this. It's like, we have never, in our knowledge, had a society that has more medical knowledge than currently now. We're the most advanced we've ever been when it comes to medicine and biology. And even with all that knowledge, you've got a group of people who are going to take horse dewormer and drink bleach and shove a light bulb up their ass because there's something about humans that we like to feel like we know something that nobody else does.
Yeah.
That we have some special little piece of knowledge that makes us different. When in reality, that's just who we are. And you don't have that knowledge. You just want to believe something so strongly that you're willing to do whatever,
I think it's something with the ego. I would just real quick, I would say, like, the way I like what you said, but I would say that this thing that humans have, maybe not so much that makes them different, but makes them better. I think there's this ego thing that's like, I'm one of the few lucky that actually know the truth, especially the word truth these days. Wow. But and everyone else is just being fooled. And I'm saying that because I know somebody who is exactly like that. The earth is flat, the moon landing didn't happen, or everybody's lying, and I'm he's really stoked that he's one of the few people that know what's actually happening, and when in fact I don't think that's a true statement.
Imagine 100 people walking through the woods, okay, and they're trying to get from A to B, and A to B might be 8-hour hike. And imagine it was a calm day, blue skies, not too cold, and then shit just gets rough. Storms come in, someone gets hurt, someone has a seizure, there's a bee sting, all this crazy shit. What I'm saying is, the reality is not worrying about the news headlines. I mean, we're all wrapped up in this stuff. When I'm talking about the reality of who is the leader, we're all following one person. This person gets struck by lightning. What happens next? Who stands up? Who says, I'm going to lead us next? Like, it's such a weird fucking thing, but it all revolves around this one emergent moment
Yeah.
of a social group of people and how they react. I'm not talking about, like, what the cool song is or what the cool dress is or no, I'm talking like fundamental at the level of we will die if we don't stick together. And that's what we're so far away from that. This is my point. We're so far away from we've so abstracted the concept of what it really means to be like a team. And what it really means is there's one of us who can read this map, and he or she is the best one at reading that map. And we're all going to trust that person, because if we all try to read the map, we're all just going to be stuck here. We're all going to fucking die. We're going to let this guy who's the best of us, he's going to read the map, and he's going to go, and we're all going to support him. We're going to do this fucking thing, and we're going to get there. Verse, you read the map, and you think we're going one way. I read it, think we're going another way. Tucker reads it, and then we all fight, and then we all just die.
Yeah.
So, like, there's this phenomenon of, we talk about, to Tucker's point, an average person thinking, they have profound knowledge or whatever. That's, obviously not the case. The concept of an average on its face, invalidates someone from being, well, I mean, there's this phenomenon, by the way. This is a lovely recent phenomenon. I don't know if you guys have heard this, where people have been judged on the same questionnaire since like the 70s or something. And one of the questions is like self-categorization of how good a driver you are, or something like that, and the levels of societal belief in their proximity to average or above average is quite fascinating. You guys heard about this? You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
I haven't.
So it comes and goes with people's estimation of self-evaluations. And it seems to be like a generational thing. And it's so fascinating. I'm trying to remember. It was Conversations with Coleman podcast with, I can't remember the lady's name, but she's what do they call it? The person who does the survey. I can't recall the scientific title, but someone who does a survey, broad surveys, scientifically significant surveys over long periods of time. Anyway, it's a very interesting concept of people's self-evaluations vis-a-vis, are you a leader, or are you a follower? And where we're at right now is the tech makes your survival a guarantee. There's really, it would be so difficult for you to roll snake eyes so many times that you lose in life in a modern society that you are not, like, you literally are going to die on the street. Like, it's just so hard to imagine people. I know it still happens, but it's still very difficult to imagine. Whereas if you're out there on your own, or if you're in a small troop of people, it's everything. It's like every day you're trying not to die. Whereas today, so what I'm getting at is the pressures we have of real consequences to our decisions is so different from the way it used to be, where it was all about who knows what comes next. And if you can predict what comes next correctly, that's life or death. And so people would naturally, because they want to live, they would naturally follow the person who is best at predicting what comes next, who is therefore the leader.
Yeah.
There's an interesting, I won't say it was a study. I think it was more like a poll, but they've done it a couple times, and they poll a bunch of people on, they'll put like 10 animals out there. You have a grizzly bear, you have a gorilla, you have a chimpanzee, you have a wolf, a dog, a house cat, a mouse, all the way down. And who they ask people, which of these animals could you defeat in a physical fight with your bare hands? And the fact that, like, you have tiger, gorilla, and grizzly bear on there, and there's people, and it's a much higher percentage than you would think, who think they could take one of those animals in a fight with their bare hands. And I'm just going, this is just a case of society as a whole, where it's like, we don't always know what we don't know.
But they're
clearly
confident that they do.
Yeah,
That's
clearly the people who think they could take a gorilla or a grizzly bear, they don't understand anything about those animals, but
so
they're
clear.
confident they could defeat one. I don't know. So humans we're just a weird species, man.
That kind of reminded me of we had this moment on Friday night on the patio. This quote from a TEDx talk I saw where a guy was talking about how the brain works and perception and stuff. But he said we're all hallucinating all the time. It's just that when we all agree on what the hallucination is, we call that reality. And I think this kind of gets back to what you were saying about like if you're stranded in this kind of phenomenon where everybody kind of agrees to something, everybody agrees on this common hallucination, like, yeah, this is it. And this epiphany or thing that was blowing my mind Friday night, it was like
that's when the magic happens.
Well, and just like an example of like one of the greatest things what am I trying to say? I had a moment where I appreciated this thing I've taken for granted forever. I appreciate it in like a new way. And it's this shared hallucination that we've all agreed to, that we all live in the year 2024, that we all decided to start year zero at. And I know it's not like the entire planet, because I think in fact, I just remember like a handful of 6 months ago or so, maybe South Korea decided to consolidate their year tracking mechanisms into the sort of common. There's probably an actual name for it, like, but they just track based on the same year that most of the planet does, and how like fantastic is that? Because and I'm kind of a data guy, you guys know that, but like having years to reference that coincide with our place in the solar system. It's not an arbitrary just thing.
It's powerful to agree upon these fictions,
massive
these stories. But let me go. I love that, by the way, John. That is such a profound example of agreeing upon an arbitrary thing, and it becomes a real thing, like the date system.
And not so arbitrary, because again, it does line up with, it takes 24 hours for the sun to, well,
what's an hour?
Right.
What the fuck is an hour, dude?
Yeah, right. So we decided, that's the arbitrary thing, is we divided them into, these fractions, but the piece of it, that lines up with like, we're at this spot in our orbit, and we'll be at this spot again, basically, because again, it's not the exact same spot, is it? We're moving through space. So, but
it's endlessly
relatively, is that the way to say it? Relatively the same spot, like 365 and a quarter days. And again, well, what's a day? Well, the time it takes to orbit once, like anyway, I just think it's like it's definitely something I was taken for granted, that I hadn't really appreciated how powerful that is to have those, because you can index events, we all agree.
Everybody agrees. Only if everybody agrees. So the disagreement is not that it's not a real thing, like an orbit is a real thing, and years and etc. But my point is, if everybody doesn't adapt to that thing and agree upon it, it's not functional. If you have your own calendar and Tucker has his own calendar and I have my own calendar, it's like we're all fucked. Yeah. So there's two parts. That's one part. This concept of having a unified metaphor that we can use the same symbolic understanding to bridge our individualism into a team. But there's another one, which I really like, and it goes back to this thing of the vision. Like we're people hiking. We have a vision of getting from A to B, and we all are unified because we all want to live. We all want to visualize that B, and that unlocks the backward induction. And that is what is the problem solving mechanism, is working backwards from this predetermined goal, right?
Yeah.
And so if we go forward deductively, we're going to endlessly argue about the fucking map and what this little squiggle means, and it's not really north. You're on true north, not magnetic north, and all the bullshit that is going to happen when you have a bunch of people that are not on a team. They're a bunch of individuals all trying to fucking, scratch and claw and fight their way to their individual success.
Yeah.
And what I'm saying is, when life is really on the line, you will happily give the reins to the person who is most capable of getting you through this, this storm. And that's what humans do, is we collectivize, and we trust the one person or group of people or whatever. We are able to work as a team unlike any other creature that I can think of. I mean, really, the amount of social capital we have at our disposal compared to wild animals or whatever you want to call, even our, chimpanzees or baboons or gorillas or whatever, not even close to us. We have fucking Social Security, we have Medicare, Medicaid, we have all these things that we've done to help our non-related neighbors, so to speak. And that's really what I'm getting at, is the power of having both a individual identity and a group identity.
Just that whole conversation just now led me to the realization that it's like the length of the day and the length of the year are I think probably the only two measurements that were decided for us. It's just based off of a physical observation that is endlessly repeatable. It's always going to be the day is one rotation, the year is one circuit around the sun. Everything else is something we invented. Yeah. Because I'll say this is a mile, and the guy next to me will be like, no, that's 2.12 kilometers.
Right.
Anything past the year and the day is a human creation. The hours, the minutes, the seconds was all invented. And it's kind of amazing to me that we even agree on those units of measurement the way we do, when historically there's everybody kind of has their own way to do things.
But Tucker, to your point, and kind of away from your point simultaneously, it's not any one time on the planet.
True.
So we have time zones. We have it's this time in this place and this time in another place. And all these conventions, I mean, we're all describing a physical reality. And that's great. That's a great attribute that humans have. But the fundamental concept that I'm trying to beat to death on is if it's not in agreement, that's the thing. It's so once we have even if it's real, like the tides or whatever. I mean, there's so many things. I think the astronomy. Let's tie it back to Sagan. Right, the inability to see the stars is going to be a detriment to our population, because we don't have this unifying symbol that we all gaze upon. It is the ultimate shibboleth of humanity versus the universe, that we have our subjective view of the stars. Nobody else has.
Stars. Yeah, right.
Nobody else can see the exact star pattern that we see from our point of view.
Yeah, and we took that away from ourselves. We don't stare at the sky and wonder what the nature of reality is anymore. We stare at a TV screen and watch the detective solve the 400th fake murder of the year on, CSI. Like,
boom, that's it. Boom, right there, 100%. Because of that, and let me continue the boom. Because of that, it's controllable. So when it's a natural event like the moon, the phases of the moon, we're all going to talk about the phases of the moon and what's coming next, and we're going to do this and that. You can't fake that shit. Okay, yep. Truman Show, notwithstanding, you can't fake that shit. Whereas the CSI Miami or whatever, it's all fake. Yep. And what you watch is your version of your reality, and what I watch is my version. Will never be unified, and let alone like China's version versus America's version and all the rest. I mean, so what ends up happening is it becomes gameable, and it becomes segregated to the individual as opposed to the team, which is very, very dangerous.
Yeah.
So going back to Sagan is talking about unifying. He's talking about making a team, but doing it not out of fear, out of beauty, making a team out of a concept that is so enticing, so opportunistically advantageous to us. If we put down our guns and build plowshares, we'll all eat just fine, right? No one's going to have a problem here. And that's what the take home of this thing is. That's what the last half hour of this discussion is all about, is realizing how important that question is on the humanity level.
Yeah.
And I think those of us who are into the sci-fi stuff and into the stories about a united humanity and what they would be able to accomplish just don't tend to be the people who could drive humanity towards that sort of society.
That's a good point. That's a really good point. Take COVID.
Like
go further with that with COVID. Go further with that. That's perfect.
I mean,
Yeah.
I believe in us as a species and what we're capable of, but I don't know. I'm not wired in a way to get up in front of 10,000 people and get them to do that. That's not the type of person I am. I'm more introspective than alpha or whatever you want to call it. I would be the map reader, not the map maker.
That's a really great. Oh,
but
finish.
I think where maybe we have an issue with society is that the map makers are not good teachers. They know how to make the map. They don't know how to teach others how to make the map.
Yeah.
And we need more map makers, but we don't know how to create them.
Well, be careful. Yeah. There's a concept here that I think we're missing. By the way, eloquently put, Tucker. I liked what you said. But the concept is the map maker and the map reader are indistinguishable after the new part of the map has been made. So it's really about just this edge case that the concept of replicating an idea infinitely is so powerful. This is why intelligence trumps all strategies. Because once John figures out how to unlock the thing and I watch him do it, now I know it. And then whoever watches me, they know it too, etc. And nothing else replicates like that in the universe. Everything that's physical and tangible has to have some boundary, some limit to its expansion and all the rest. Yep. And so having...
You can't teach novelty by its own definition. It's something that just...
So back to the lady in the black and white tower. Yeah. Right. In the red apple.
Special case of the person or people who are a little bit crazy, let's just say. The map maker is the one who sees the thing before it's ever seen. They believe in they have a faith. This is going back to Sagan. The map maker is the one who believes at the end of this crack in this cave, there's going to be something at the back end. I'm going to see it and it's going to be amazing. I don't know what it is, but it's in there. And I'm not going to stop till I get there. And that's that next level. But once they get in, so I'm referring to these caves that were discovered that would have a cave in the back of the cave, like a long tunnel. And then once you get through that cave, you're in total darkness. I don't know if you guys are familiar with this. John, we did a podcast, I don't know if you recall, where we did some links to the caves in Spain and France.
Oh, yeah. Right.
So there's these caves that have cave paintings, but they're not in the cave. They're in the cave inside the cave.
Where there's no they would have had to have torches and if I remember right, the point of the article was there was oxygen deprivation happening that deep into the cave
you're all dying to get back in here. And my point is, once the first person was able to do it by their craziness or whatever, everybody else knew it was possible and they could then do it too. So that is the small sliver of difference between the map maker and the map reader.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about now, back to the story at hand, is how much of the map is left uncharted. And this is where we get this lopsided game theory where the map makers now are diminishing in value. And what's increasing in value is the broker position, because there's really not a lot of new map to be found. I mean, there is, but let's just say this is a common thought today, is there's not a lot of new map to be found. We can already make a lifetime's worth of gold and whatever from our current map structure. It's more important to control the map. So the broker, and to control the people who read the map and to control the thoughts of those people. So the broker now is so powerfully advantageous. And by advantageous, I mean at a subconscious level. So the person, before they make their decision, they're going to feel, or their subconscious is going to categorize what the outcome would be in a predictive model capability. And their best model prediction will be to get a bunch of people to follow me. Has nothing to do with finding new map or making new map or finding the edges of the map, right? It's just, if I get enough of these followers to follow me, I am set. I'm set for life. And so this is where we're at, is a bunch of divisions of the whole that end up, starting at the national level, and it goes to whatever. I mean, you divide up, groups of people, infinite number of ways. So That's what ends up happening is we get so back to Tucker's point, once you expand where the brain can't reach the feet anymore and the two are not in concert, then you get a fall.
This is I think a good segue back to the story, but also we're like, I think probably a good time to like wrap up the part 1 episode here. But I want to say like it is a good segue where we can pick up next time is the character of S.R. Haddon, because he's I think we'll have a lot to say about that character and who they might be sort of in our life might be like similar characters in our world today. But oh yeah, and also I remembered, I just have to correct myself, the South Korea thing, I remembered it's the they used to have like 2 or 3 ways of tracking like your age, basically. If you were like, there was one age that was just basically based on if you were born anytime after January 1st, like you were basically just considered as January 1st was your birthday. So it was just, they had like 2 or 3 really complicated ways of calculating your age. And that's what they, so it wasn't so much the years.
There might still be a couple civilizations that kind of do that in the Asian world, where it's like everybody gets a year older on the Lunar New Year.
Yeah, right.
Like you don't have a birthday.
I see. Like a cohort. They have an entire cohort or class of age. That's interesting.
Yeah. But if I remember right, the story was, or the news story, whatever, was that they were abandoning those kind of older ways and agreeing on this shared hallucination that like the actual birthday, like that's when you get a year older kind of a thing. So but yeah, okay, awesome conversation, you guys. I love it. I don't even know if we're halfway through the storyline of the movie, so close. That's awesome. Not even close. Yeah, so there's so much more to dig into, and yeah, I think next episode that'll be good to start with that character of the Haddon character.
I like that. Yeah, I like that a lot. I think it's a great
and we can talk about it on that episode. But if you guys haven't watched the Into the Panderverse, the South Park,
yes,
it's so good that basically like the town handymans are so in demand that they end up becoming the Elon Musks and the Jeff Bezos and create their own space race. And it was just brilliantly done. I love those guys. But
yeah, true. That's another great topic of for podcast episodes. It's just like South Park and the satire. But yeah, so awesome. Thank you guys so much. We'll call it good on this one, and then look forward to the next one. So if anybody who is listening, we do have an email if you're interested in getting a hold of us, sendingpoets@gmail.com. So we're just planning to do much more of these. I would say I don't think our expectation is that everything will have to do with a movie, but as you can tell, even though the topic was the movie, I mean, we're just the conversation. That's the whole point we're doing this, is that we just really like talking about the ideas. And so we're all 3 of us really excited to just keep doing that. So
I love it. Yeah. And it's exactly the phenomenon we're looking to evoke from each other, which is this like emergent description of beautiful topics. Like this is the whole point. Like you can't think of this thing without the conversation. Like in the conversation, it emerges what your thoughts would have been if you would have had the conversation. So we got to have the conversation. We got to look for the beautiful things. When we see it, we got to describe it poetically in each our own language. And this is the value of what we're trying to do.
Hear, hear.
A lot of fun, guys. A lot of fun.
Yes, absolutely.
Nice. Yeah. Look forward to talking to you guys. Hopefully we'll do one a week. Hopefully.
Yeah, that's the plan. I think as best we can with our schedules and things, we'll just try to do these weekly. So.
And I just want to throw a seed out there, because if we are going to be talking about the Haddon character, it's brought up in the book that there are physical and health benefits to living in space.
Right.
And I have not dug into this the way I would like to, and I'm glad we have a week before we're talking about that, because I wonder if that idea has changed in those 30 years, if there's new data on the radiation exposure or the I know they did the whole study with the twin astronauts where one went to space for a year and the other one didn't. And I'd like to dig in that a little more to see if that's still a valid idea or if that's changed. But
I think that's a great idea. And I just want to add one more little cherry on top to the Sagan thing, which is like you were talking about before, Tucker, his predictive capabilities, his ability to envision things. And I love fact checking, obviously, but I love how many predictions that were made and concepts he came up with.
Yeah.
That were more science fact than anything, honestly.
Yeah.
Because I do, even if you take the health benefits, if that's no longer a thing, I do think there are certain segments and individuals who are trying to create something off planet so that they can escape when shit goes wrong. Or they can live above the peons, or whatever it ends up being. We're not there yet, but I think there's people working towards that.
Remember Elysia? I think was the movie. I don't know if you
Elysium.
Elysium.
Matt Damon, right?
Correct.
Matt Damon.
Yeah. That's a real mind bender. That concept. Yeah. But I think really
also has Jodie Foster in it, by the way.
Oh, that's right. That's totally right. That's so funny. It's so funny. But on top of it, I think in the story it was like low oxygen. If I can help with that little sequence.
Yes,
I believe it was a low oxygen environment that was supposed to give him some sort of like a reduced cell division. His cancer was going out of control. So maybe to your point, extended stays in space is severely injurious, unless you have radiation shielding. But if you're dying because of your cancer, well, maybe being in like a little cryo chamber or whatever it was, maybe that's for the best. I don't know. But I'm just saying that's kind of my gut says that.
I put that in the
right.
agenda.
It did have
homework.
It did have to do with the oxidation in your body because you're not fighting gravity, you're burning less calories, you're expending less energy just to survive on the daily basis, so you're not oxidizing as fast as you would on Earth.
Exactly.
The other flip side of that is you spend long enough up there, you can't ever come back.
No, you can't, especially with bone density loss and all
the
your
effects of gravity, all that.
Yeah, your atrophy and all that. But ultimately, and I'm looking forward to your research, I think you're right. It's going to be problematic to have extended human occupancy outside of Earth's protective layers, without some new tech. There's going to have to be something new that I think in the past in sci-fi stuff I've read, they always use water shields. Like you just have water is going to be your fuel and your everything. And so you just encase your spacecraft in like a shield of water or something and bring it with you. That's kind of my understanding is the sci-fi concept. Yeah.
Excellent teaser for the next episode. I did put that in the agenda for Tucker's your homework. So yeah.
Gotcha.
Well, yeah, that's awesome. All right. Well, yeah, we'll call it good here. Thank you guys